What is up, y'all? We have another interesting headline today. This headline is from CNN Health, and it is about HIV and vaccines, two very interesting topics. So the title of the article, HIV vaccine trial dubbed last roll of the dice, halted over poor results. So this is a pretty interesting article. Apparently, they've been running this trial for several years. It's called the PrEPVacc prevention study, and it's being run in Africa, apparently by African researchers. And what they're looking at is two things. There's two parts to this study that they're doing. Number one is the PrEP, that's pre-exposure prevention, and that is basically antivirals that they give to people. A lot of you here in the United States have probably even seen these signs saying, is PrEP right for you? And they're basically trying to sell people on taking this pre-exposure prophylaxis like all the time, which is basically antivirals. And in this study, they used Truvada, which is one of the ones that they're always using now. And then they have another one called Descovy. And so they were investigating those two preventions plus two separate vaccines. So basically, they recently just halted the vaccine portion of the trial, and what they cited was basically it didn't work. So they said it was not effective, but there was no concerns over safety, causing them to remove that arm of the trial. So I thought that was kind of interesting. They basically just said the vaccines were ineffective. So I had to dig a little bit deeper, of course. And one thing that came to mind, which geographically was not related, and it ended up not being related based on age group, supposedly, from the website, from the PrEPVacc website. So I had thought back to a story that we had read in early October of this year, where many of you might remember this, 90 female students at a school in Africa had come down with basically like a paralysis syndrome, and they didn't have any good explanation for it. So my mind went straight to vaccine clinical trials or the PrEP, because I know that that's something that they had been using and testing and everything. That does not seem related in this case, although we could dig deeper and try to figure it out. I did read up to try to see any, if they had any follow-up on what had happened there, and there was no follow-up, so we really don't know. The reason that it came to mind as being interesting and possibly related is that they say that there are 39 million people who have HIV in the world, about half of which are women, and that the fastest growing population to become HIV positive is young women between 15 to 24. So it would make sense that they would try to do a clinical trial or try to administer them something like this Truvada or Descovy as like a prevention. So I still have a lot of questions there. I didn't find any update on what's going on with those girls from that school, and I still would like to know, for sure that it wasn't related to something like this. However, this PrEPVacc study, they say that the participants have to be 18 and over, and the geographic distribution, like the countries that they use, this was Uganda, Tanzania, South Africa, and it was pretty far away from where that incident had happened. So it doesn't seem related in this case. But I always like to think about these things. It's extremely important whenever a health issue pops up that we ask ourselves, what new things are they using? Are they doing clinical trials? Have they just rolled out a new vaccination? Have they just changed the way that we do something, even down to, this is kind of random, but I don't know if a lot of y'all know, I think it's called R22. That was like the old Freon that they used in air conditioning units. They recently swapped that out with a newer free on. And you have to wonder, like, could there be, health implications with the new one that we'll see, things that change. You always have to ask, like, is this related in some way? Something that we change, something that we bring out new, what health impacts could it have? How could it possibly be related? So, interesting thing about HIV vaccines, they have been trying to make them since the mid 1980s for about 36 years, and they've never had any success. The most interesting part of this article was the take home. We always have to look at what's the take home. Why are they telling us this story, and what do they want us to know about it? And the take home was this. This is from Pontiano Kalibu, and he was one of the main people in this trial. And he said, quote, "We must look to a new generation of vax approaches and technology." That's the take home of the article. The take home of the article is that these DNA protein-based viruses like AIDS vax, which they've been trying to rework that since like 1991, and there's a protein MVV DNA protein-based vaccine plus a Poxvax vaccine that they're trying to use also. Neither of those worked. They were found to be ineffective, which we already knew. But the take home is it's time to scrap this technology and go for a new technology. So obviously, roll in the mRNA vaccine. So I decided to look back a little bit further. None of this was from this article. This is me investigating more. And what it looks like is that back in 2015, IAVI, which it stands for International AIDS Vaccination, I can't even read my handwriting here, but anyways, it's the International AIDS Vaccination, basically like institution or board that they're trying to find a vaccine for AIDS. They hooked up with Cure Vac, which I don't know if y'all know what Cure Vac is, but Cure Vac is a company. It's not US based. I think it's based in Europe, and it is funded a lot by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and they are working on a lot of mRNA technology, and they have been for know how to tell you how annoying it is that every time I'm talking about something interesting that y'all might not have known, that my phone randomly overheats. But it's probably just because Apple wants me to buy a new phone. The other thing it also does is not tell me how many people are watching, because I'll have hearts and stuff like that and it'll show me like no one's even watching. But it's what it is. Let's continue on. So the interesting thing about this, like I said, is back in 2015, IAVI, which is this international AIDS vaccine group that wants to develop a vaccine, they partnered with Cure Vac to basically come up with an HIV vaccine. And we know that they're working on mRNA shots, and that they have additional, funding and ties with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And y'all can look this up pretty easily, or I have articles if you guys want me to send them to you. But like I said, the take home of this trial failure was we must look to the next generation of vaccines and technology in order to tackle this problem of needing an HIV vaccine. So what was pretty interesting about this besides that was the fact that, they're pushing this Truvada and this Descovy on people to be taking this constantly all the time. And I found an article that just shows like what are the basic side effects. The basic side effects that you might have right away if you were taking one of these as HIV prevention would be just like nausea, diarrhea, headache. Okay, doesn't sound too bad, but these are antivirals, and antivirals have horrible side effect profiles. They always have, ever since they originally used them to treat HIV back in the 80s. We've seen so many issues with remdesivir. All antivirals do have a lot of side effects, and so then they want you to know that the other side effects that can happen: liver damage, kidney damage, and bone density loss. So liver and kidneys are so important. These are vital organs to detoxify your body. If you destroy them, you are basically screwed as far as being able to survive. You know, if you have liver damage, you'll do everything from lose your ability to clot and start to just have random episodes of bleeding and things like that, all the way to you can't process and get rid of ammonia in the body, and you can become totally just encephalitic, where basically encephalopathy. You'll have encephalopathy, where you basically can't, communicate, talk, anything. Like your whole neurological system starts to shut down and you're not able to function. Kidneys, we know the problem with kidneys. You could end up on dialysis. It's gonna affect how well affect how well your body processes like medications, toxins, everything. So these are not small side effects. These are extremely important side effects to watch out for. The most interesting part of all of this, though, is that HIV, like, where did HIV even come from? And y'all know I love the Strucker Memorandum. I've talked about it a ton of times. And it's very interesting because it goes back to the same thing I was trying to talk about earlier, where you have to trace back, like, what are they doing when these diseases pop up? Well, in 1979 to 1981-ish, they were doing hepatitis B vaccine clinical trials in Los Angeles and New York. Surprise, surprise, they were doing them in gay men, and that was the same exact places where the original HIV patients started to pop up with AIDS, basically. Aside from that, HIV in Africa started to pop up when they were also doing smallpox vaccine trials, and they were treating for that. So there was this kind of like interesting distribution there. A lot of times when you try to research on this, they'll say, they tried to say like HIV, they found it in specimens back to the 50s. Here's what's really interesting. HIV, first of all, it used to be called HTLV-3. There was two other, HTLV-1, HTLV-2, which are two other kind of immune system destroying viruses that are also in the population that we just don't talk about as much. I think they're maybe not as much in America, but they definitely do exist. But they eventually kind of came back to decide that HIV was originally a simian virus. So there's two different HIV-1, HIV-2, and they felt these came from two different like simian viruses that had somehow made it into people. A lot of talk on the internet, if you try to research this and stuff, will say that it was, I think in Cameroon, the original chimpanzees that were found to have the SIV that led to the HIV. But you have to look even further back, because if that was, they say 60 to 80 years ago, what else was happening back then? So here's something really interesting you can look up. First of all, how did they make the polio vaccines? They actually used monkey kidney cells, and I think they were macaques or pseudomangabes, but they were using these monkey kidney cells to create these vaccines for the polio. Then they were testing them on other monkeys. So that was kind of interesting. What's even wilder, though, is that you can find articles where they actually took these early polio vaccines and gave them to chimpanzees in Africa. There's whole articles where Jane Goodall is saving the chimpanzee population back in the 50s, 60s, which would be like 60 to 80 years ago, and she's literally giving these chimpanzees the polio vaccine, which is interesting because it was originally made in the monkey kidney cells. And just the thought of how did the supposed SIV go from, these animals to these other wild animals, supposedly to humans, or, however else you want to think about that. What I'm thinking is that they could have contaminated the wild population with something that looks like SIV, and then they contaminated the human population with what looks like HIV. But y'all can look into that yourself. There's an amazing book called The River by Edward Hooper. I have a copy of it, but I haven't read the whole thing yet. But he apparently traces all of this, through Africa, through the studies, through everything. And it's very interesting because I tried to look up, I think, Cameroon chimpanzees polio vaccine and put that in Google. And all that started popping up was things like disputing that had anything to do with the origins of HIV or the SIV in those monkeys, so or apes. Very interesting stuff. So look into that. But anyways, to wrap all this up, I just want to say they're always trying to push you a cure for anything that they probably created themselves. If you do watch the Stricker Memorandum, he talks about how HIV actually looks very similar to like a bovine and a visna virus, and how that's the type of agar, which is like a medium that they use in laboratories to like grow different cells and grow vaccines and things on, and that he feels it could have been just like an accidental recombinant from growing it in those different tissues. And then they take those things, put them in a shot, give them to people, and then bam, you have, a new pathogen. But what is interesting is that there's always these things going on, then they're always trying to sell you a cure. And like we said, there's this this pre-exposure prophylaxis that they're trying to sell, Descovy and Truvada, but that has a lot of health implications. It has a lot of drawbacks, liver damage, kidney damage. So, and same thing with these vaccines that are just failing left and right. They want to now, their goal is to sell an mRNA vaccine for HIV. We already know that, Cure Vac is working on it. That's Bill and Melinda Gates. That's the International AIDS Vaccine Program. And that's the whole entire push. The whole failure of this vaccine trial, their take home was, we need new technologies. So there you have it. Sorry, somebody has a little loud of a car, and I had to put my window down because the overheating of the phone. But the take home is, first of all, and I know a lot of you love you guys. I know a lot of y'all are the no virus crowd. I'm not really with that. And I'm just going to say, if there is a virus, like, what would I do? Even if I think there's no virus, even though they measure, viral load, things like that, even if I was going to say there's no virus, and I thought it was just this person's magnetic resonance making one person sick, making the other person sick, you're still going to want to protect yourself. So casual, relationships obviously can lead to HIV infection and a whole bunch of other things. Same thing with, not taking care of your body. If you do get sick, or even if you are not infected with anything yet, but there's a whole host of lifestyle issues going on there that are going to weaken the immune system, whether you have an infection or not. There is a ton of case studies, research, and everything showing there's a lot of, especially women who were married to men that got infected with HIV. Those women didn't necessarily ever get AIDS. They might have tested positive, but they just lived on their lives. And same thing with a lot of people who are have HIV infections. If they take really, really good care of themselves, then they might not progress, to AIDS and having all those issues of basically having no immune system. So if you are infected with something, or if you think, that it's possible, live based on your lifestyle, you're going to want to always do the things that you need to do to take as best care of your body as possible. So exercise, eating right, limiting toxins, obviously limiting chances for exposure. Don't do drugs, because drugs are bad for your immune system. They're bad for your body, liver, kidneys, detox systems. You're not going to want to obviously share drug needles. Please don't do that. And you're not going to want to have casual sexual relationships with people, because all those could lead to infection. Those are would be the main route of preventing this and not needing a pharmaceutical or some crazy vaccination that they just thought up and that they're just dying to sell you. It always comes back to, how do you take care of yourself? How are you treating your body? How are you supporting your immune system? So things like vitamin C, zinc, vitamin D, like I said, not trying to use a lot of drugs, pharmaceuticals, toxins, anything that's going to damage the body. Those are going to be your best route of, taking care of yourself overall. I think we've all seen that movie, probably The Dallas Buyers Club. It was very good, very interesting. I wish I knew a lot more about the story. I'm going to probably try to research up on it about exactly, I think they were using like peptide C or something like that to help the people that already had HIV not to get sick, not to get AIDS. And they also talked about the issues with the antivirals, how those were making people sicker. So certainly some truth in that, and we always have to think about what goes into our body versus what habits we have and everything there. So it's pretty interesting stuff to think that they kind of had that insight back in the 80s, and yet the CDC, the government, all these companies, obviously they're not going to focus on those types of prevention. They're just going to focus on things I can sell you. As far as, expensive, costly vaccines and basically lifelong antivirals that are going to cause your body other damage that's then going to need more of their resources. So, but that's all I have to say about that. Sorry that this ended up a two-parter, y'all. My phone, I guess I just need to get a new one. I have that little mini and it just can't handle, streaming for too long, but I am going to upload this to YouTube, and I will be back with more health news probably tomorrow. If y'all have any specific articles or specific topics that you want me to talk about, please send me a DM and I will go ahead and do that. Also, if anybody needs help with their diet, exercise, overall health, lifestyle, there's something called CAMS, that's complementary, basically complementary habits. Like if you have a health issue or something, complementary ways of treating that. So this is exactly what Samantha and I do and help people with their lifestyle through Reset Health and Fitness. So feel free to reach out, send me a DM anytime, or hit up my link tree. Y'all have a wonderful day, and I will be back soon.